It's 6 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che here to provide you with the latest. Let's start with the headlines. It's bad enough foreign reporters invited by North Korea to cover its Workers' Party Congress weren't allowed inside the venue. A BBC team was detained, then expelled after the authorities decided their reporting was disrespectful of their leader Kim Jong-un. South Korea responds to the North's reference to itself as a nuclear state. Seoul says no country in the world will agree with that notion. Instead, it promised more sanctions while labeling Pyongyang's request for talks as insincere. As if South Korea's shipbuilders aren't facing enough hurdles, the corporate bonds of the nation's big three are due to expire next year. The central bank could lend a helping hand, but critics argue the ailing companies don't deserve to be bailed out. It hasn't been easy for foreign media outlets to report on North Korea's ruling Workers' Party Congress. And on top of that, one journalist and his team were even detained by officials and eventually expelled from his reporting. Kwon So-hwa has our top story.
A BBC reporter who was in Pyongyang before and during the 7th Workers' Party Congress has been expelled from North Korea along with his team. The CNN reporter who first reported the news said on his Twitter feed that BBC Tokyo correspondent Rupert Wingfield Hayes had been detained and then expelled by North Korea for reporting deemed, quote, disrespectful of leader Kim Jong-un, as North Korean authorities had said during a press conference. Although it's not exactly known which parts of the reports the North objects to, the stories highlighted aspects of life in Pyongyang, and one of them referred to North Korea's leader as corpulent. The correspondent, a producer, and a cameraman arrived in North Korea prior to the Congress, accompanying Nobel Prize laureates on a research trip. The BBC said the reporter was questioned for 8 hours on the weekend and made to sign a statement before his release. It's not a big exaggeration to say that reporting on the Workers' Party Congress hasn't been any easier for the journalists who traveled all the way to Pyongyang for the once-in-a-generation event than it has been for us here in Seoul across the border. Journalists with the more than 100 international media outlets in the North Korean capital had to be content with watching the sessions on screens outside of the venue instead of being allowed inside, despite having been invited by the regime to attend.
It's North Korea. I'm happy that we are here and able to even stand at the front. But at the same time, yeah, it's frustrating not to get any access or any information.
What is happening there? So it's interesting because we have to write about that.
Reporters found themselves touring locations such as an electric cable factory, a silk mill, and the Pyongyang subway, places the North Korean regime apparently wanted them to cover even more than the proceedings of the rare Congress. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Staying with the Workers' Party Congress, the North's highest decision-making body has revealed a major decision to forge ahead with its nuclear weapons development. Connie Kim gives us the updates on this, the fourth straight day of the regime's rare political convention.
North Korea's ruling party has adopted a decision to improve and expand its nuclear arsenal, a move that will further isolate the reclusive state from the international community. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Monday that Pyongyang will pursue economic development and boost the state's self-defensive nuclear force, both in quality and quantity, supporting the so-called Pyeongjin policy of twin economic and nuclear development spearheaded by leader Kim Jong-un. The KCNA statement also formalized North Korea's position of declaring itself a responsible nuclear weapon state and reiterated that it would not use nuclear weapons unless its sovereignty is threatened by other nuclear-armed countries. In regards to inter-Korean relations, the resolution clarified that Pyongyang will push for a peaceful reunification of the two Koreas, but will mercilessly wipe out all opposition if Seoul opts for a war. What's interesting to note is the naming of late North Korean leaders Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. They are normally both referred to as great leaders, but in this resolution, the founder of North Korea and grandfather of Kim Jong-un was called the, quote, great leader, while the young Kim's father, Kim Jong-il, was stated as being the, quote, prominent leader. Speculation is that the three Kims will be given different titles from the Congress, with current leader Kim Jong-un given the party's top position, securing the legitimacy of the ruling Kim family's dynasty. Going into the fourth day of the event, a discussion of party rules was expected to be on the agenda. There was also speculation the North would hold a mass parade to celebrate its biggest party congress in more than 3 decades. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea responded to North Korea's reference to itself as a nuclear state, saying neither Seoul nor the international community will go along with it. Kim Hyun-bin has the defense ministry's adamant stance on this matter, as well as the regime's request for talks.
South Korea's defense ministry refuses to accept North Korea as a nuclear state and says Seoul will take steps to block Pyongyang.
Neither Seoul or the international community will recognize North Korea as a nuclear state, and we will continue to impose strong sanctions on Pyongyang to pressure it to give up its nuclear program.
The defense ministry spokesman also characterized the regime's proposal for talks with Seoul as insincere.
North Korea wants to conduct nuclear and missile tests and at the same time wants to start a military dialogue. There is no sincerity in their offer.
He said that Seoul is open to dialogue with the North, but only as long as the regime ends its provocations and takes concrete steps toward denuclearization. Meanwhile, South Korea and the United States are scheduled to discuss implementing an operational plan designed to counter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The so-called 4D plan, which stands for Disrupt, Detect, Destroy, and Defend, gives South Korea the right to launch a preemptive strike against North Korea's nuclear and missile capabilities. The South Korean delegation will be led by Deputy Minister for National Defense Policy, Ryu Jae-sung, and the U.S. delegation will be led by Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, Abraham Denmark. The allies will discuss the plan at the Korea-U.S. Integrated Defense Dialogue in Washington. The talks start Monday and run through Tuesday. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Standing in the way of Pyongyang's nuclear ambition is the international community, which refuses to acknowledge North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. So what are the potential risks if the reclusive regime were to get its wish? Hwang Ho-jun takes a closer look at the significance of the recognition the communist state so desperately craves.
5 countries in the world are recognized as nuclear weapon states: the US, France, the UK, Russia, and China, under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968. The status doesn't give them permission to keep their nuclear weapons forever. Instead, as parties to the treaty, they share the goal of nuclear disarmament. There are also 3 countries outside of the NPT, India, Pakistan, and Israel, that are known to have nuclear weapons. North Korea, on the other hand, has long sought recognition as a nuclear weapon state, but still hasn't gained the designation. It has conducted 4 nuclear tests in 2006, 2009, and 2013, with the most recent one in January. So why isn't it recognized as a nuclear state? According to one expert, that would give the North an edge in negotiations, allowing it to make demands on South Korea and the US.
For example, North Korea will be able to demand that the U.S. forces in South Korea suspend their annual exercises or reduce them in number.
Washington and Seoul would not want to hand the regime that kind of bargaining chip. The expert also says recognizing North Korea as a nuclear state could destabilize the region and launch an arms race. The U.S. has vowed to protect the Korean peninsula as long as Seoul and Tokyo remain nuke-free.
Once we recognize North Korea as a nuclear state, the U.S. will lose all its leverage in trying to prevent South Korea and Japan, let alone other countries, from developing a nuclear weapon.
During its Workers' Party Congress, North Korea said it would not use nuclear weapons unless its sovereignty is threatened, and vowed to fulfill its obligation for non-proliferation. The question is, can North Korea be trusted to follow through? Judging from its past behavior, the international community's answer seems to be no. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Assembly has unanimously condemned North Korea for embracing nuclear weapons as well as its continued provocations. Kim Young-gil has the strong response from the nation's lawmakers.
The ruling Saenuri Party has urged North Korea to grant the International Atomic Energy Agency access to its nuclear facilities and follow in the footsteps of Iran, which signed a historic deal to curb its nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. In a press release Monday, the party also said the South Korean government will fully cooperate with the international community to impose stronger sanctions on Pyongyang in order to curb its nuclear ambitions. The main opposition Minju Party of Korea said it could not accept a nuclear-armed North Korea.
North Korea has a policy of becoming a nuclear state while also saying it will denuclearize. That kind of duality is not acceptable. It only threatens peace and stability on the Korean peninsula.
The floor leader said it was inappropriate for North Korea to think that advancing its nuclear program would help sustain the Kim Jong-un regime, saying it will instead hasten the regime's demise. He said from now on, the Minju Party would openly speak out on North Korea's human rights violations and any provocations. The minor opposition People's Party also urged North Korea to put an end to its provocations and move toward denuclearization.
North Korea said it was a permanent nuclear state. However, its nukes do nothing to either help improve its moribund economy or ensure stability on the Korean peninsula. If the North sincerely wants peace and improved relations, it must give up its nuclear ambitions.
And also urged the government to engage in dialogue with Pyongyang to find alternative ways of persuading the regime to give up its nuclear arsenal. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
It's a busy day for South Korean politicians. Korea's ruling Saenuri Party held a meeting this afternoon with all of its newly elected lawmakers. Officials want to gather ideas on how to lead the Conservative Party out of its current crisis. The party is still without a leader since Kim Moo-sung, the party's former number one, stepped down to take responsibility for last month's crushing loss in the general election. Saenuri is also expected to discuss when and how to select a new interim leadership. On the other side of the aisle, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea's new floor leader Woo Sang-ho held a brief meeting with Park Ji-won, his counterpart from the minor opposition People's Party. As the opposition parties will hold the majority in the 20th National Assembly, the two vowed to respect and follow the will of the public, saying they will try to serve the people in collaboration with the ruling party. Korean researchers have found more cases of revisionism in Japanese history textbooks. The Seoul-based Northeast Asian History Foundation scoured middle school textbooks by 8 publishers. One passage says after the ancient kingdom of Shilla conquered the Kaya Confederacy, Shilla began offering Kaya products to Japan as a tribute to keep it out of the kingdom's affairs. The researchers criticized the depiction, saying the idea Japan was able to dominate the northern part of the Korean peninsula through Kaya has been discredited in both Korean and Japanese academic circles. The list of errors also includes a reference to the Korean peninsula as the Joseon Peninsula and a passage that says Japan invaded the peninsula to gain control over the kingdoms of Baekje and Shilla. A list of Korean victims killed during the Great Kanto Earthquake of 1923 has been found among official Japanese records. 2 Japanese researchers looking into the matter identified 71 Korean victims among some 50,000 recorded by the Japanese government office responsible for providing relief at the time. The list includes people massacred by Japanese soldiers, as was previously confirmed in a document drafted by the Korean government in the 1950s. Experts say the massacre would have killed more Koreans than the earthquake, as most victims lived on the outskirts of Tokyo, while the natural disaster struck in the center of the city. The number of Koreans killed is expected to increase when the total number of quake victims is determined. Investigations into the toxic humidifier sterilizers that have been linked to numerous deaths continues to widen. The former CEO of the Korean branch of Ex-Oxy Racket Bankiser, Shin Hyun-woo, was summoned by Seoul prosecutors for a second time on Monday. Before entering the prosecutor's office in the morning, Shin offered an apology and promised to spend the rest of his life doing everything he can for the victims' families. Shin is considered a key figure in the case as he headed the company when the toxic cleaners hit the markets in the early 2000s. This comes a week after the current chief of the Korean unit issued a formal apology for the first time since the Korean government made the connection between the sterilizers and the deaths 5 years ago. Families of the victims and some 50 civic groups are set to stage a week-long public boycott of Oxy products starting from Tuesday. A huge chunk of the corporate bond contracts held by Korea's top 3 shipbuilders is set to expire next year. The companies have been failing to turn a profit for years, instead staying afloat on constant bailouts. Lee Min-young explains why the once dominant giants may be running out of time.
Concerns are mounting that Korea's shipbuilders might go belly up next year. Financial sources say a significant amount of corporate bonds issued by the industry's top 3 companies, Hyundai Heavy Industries, Daewoo Shipbuilding, and Marine Engineering, and Samsung Heavy Industries are due to expire next year. The total amount stands at around $1.9 billion. Daewoo has to pay back roughly $900 million, while each Samsung and Hyundai Heavy need to return $510 million and $580 million. Market watchers say it won't be an easy task as the companies have been suffering eye-watering losses due to low oil prices and slowing global demand. The companies won a mere 5 contracts in the first 4 months of the year, while Daewoo posted an operating loss in the first quarter. With fears growing the shipbuilders could file for bankruptcy, some experts say it's time for the state to bail them out.
The Bank of Korea could issue more currency and the government could inject money from its budget. A separate fund could also be set up so that the losses caused by corporate restructuring could be shared, instead of watching one company collapse.
However, critics argue that by printing more money to help the ailing shipbuilders, the central bank would negatively impact the livelihoods of ordinary people to save companies that have been dragging on Korea's corporate landscape for years. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
Korean cosmetics makers are expected to tap deeper into the Iranian market after the 2 countries agreed to waive import inspections. According to Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, local manufacturers which have met the good manufacturing practice requirements will be exempted from inspections in Iran. The ministry expects the measures to boost exports of Korean cosmetics to the Middle Eastern nation. The 2 countries also agreed to set up a promotions hall in Iran within this year, which will display and sell Korean cosmetics. And that brings us to the end of this hour's newscast. As always, thank you for watching.